Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website, www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight is our semi-annual election special, the 2023 fall general election. A lot going on, a lot to talk about. A lot has already happened. So I'd like to say hello to my co-host, Denise Clay Murray. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And Lance Haver, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Good. And we'd also like to bring in our very special guest for the first hour of the show tonight, Mr. Vincent Thompson of Thompson Media Man Communications. Vincent, how are you tonight?
I'm good tonight. It's election day, so it's always a great day for democracy.
Yes, it's been an interesting day already. We knew it would be. This morning into the afternoon, Lance and I were going around to different polling places. We had some interesting interactions. We were there when we found out that the campaign in the 3rd district was using fraudulent literature. We heard about that as soon as it happened, which was interesting. Or right around when it happened. And we were also there when right after poll watchers were denied access to a polling place in the 3rd district. So it's been an interesting day already. Vince, let me start with you. You are, I feel like you're everywhere when these big events are happening. Where have you been today, and what have you been hearing? What have you noticed?
Well, I mean, I spent most of my day at work on my day job, which is with Philadelphia City Council. So I spent time here, and then I took the rest of the day off. So just anybody who wants to know, I was not on the taxpayer dime when I took that time off. Just want to make that very clear. And I went around to South Restaurant, which is starting to be the gathering place for elected officials, especially African American elected officials. And I was there for most of the day, just hearing what was going on around the city. It was interesting to see many of the new city council people, the expected city council people, and how when city council comes in 2024, it's going to be a much younger city council. It's probably going to be one of the youngest city councils we've ever had as far as age and also amount of service in council. We're going to have a lot of council members who are either starting their first term in 2024 or they're going to be just finishing up one term. So it's going to be an interesting city council. And then seeing the talk about who will be the next council president. When Sherelle Parker came in, she got a rousing applause because most people believe that she will be the next mayor. Now, everyone who's listening, I still urge you to go out and vote. You have an hour to vote, so please make your decision. Don't let us pundits tell you how to vote. But she did get a rousing welcome as people expected her to be the next mayor. And frankly, I expect that will happen before the end of the night as well.
All right. Denise Clay Murray, how's your day been so far?
Well, so far it's been interesting in that when I've talked to several of the candidates that are involved in this race, and I asked about turnout, and the adjective that I got most often was that turnout was moderate. It's not low, it's not high, it's moderate. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. But, considering that we only got 26% in the primaries, anything is a plus. And I also bumped into Nicholas O'Rourke and Kendra Brooks. Kendra Brooks is the incumbent Working Families Party member of Philadelphia City Council, and Nicholas O'Rourke is trying to join her and have it so that those two are the minority party in council, and instead of having two Republicans on as council persons at large. And it was, they both said they were cautiously optimistic, but I think that in the event that Nicholas O'Rourke is able to do what he wasn't able to do 4 years ago, and that is become the minority, want to make the Working Families Party the minority party, at least in terms of council at large. in council, the question we all have to ask ourselves is, how has the Working Families Party been able to accomplish something that no one else has been able to? What's their secret sauce? I asked Kendra Brooks that, and she said that she didn't know, except that they were taking it slow, and in slow and steady runs the race. But it'll be interesting to see, if people try to duplicate what Working Families did, if they're successful tonight.
Mm-hmm. And Lance, you and I were traveling around mostly in the 3rd and 4th district this morning and into the afternoon, going to different polling places, talking to people, finding out about different, what the turnouts were. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, before we do that, I'd like to follow up with Vincent. I think we should just pause and realize how remarkable it is to have an election. We kind of overlook the fact that this is a unique opportunity for people to be heard. We don't always vote. We don't always have good choices. Significant campaign contributions get in the way of true democracy. But it just is remarkable. Literally thousands of people from throughout the city have volunteered to be committee people, have volunteered to work for candidates, show up at the polls, hand out literature, try and get people to vote for what they believe are the better candidates. And it all works pretty much without too many police getting involved. Yes, every now and then there's someone who tries to cheat, and every now and then there's somebody who loses their temper and ends up in a shouting match or grabbing papers out of anyone's hands. But 1,600 divisions voting, at least 2 people, 2 committee people, usually more for every polling place, talking about literally thousands of people participating in a democratic process that we all too often don't appreciate because it just seems normal to us. But I know there are other parts of the world where we would look at this and go, this is what we aspire to. And I don't want to lose sight of how remarkable and how wonderful it is as we start talking about all of the problems and all of the difficulties. Mm-hmm. And now that I've said that, we can start talking about the problems. We don't really know what the voter turnout's going to be, but every place that we visited, what we were told was the turnout was dismal, was low, they didn't expect it to be good. There were a couple of the committee people who had suggested that in neighborhoods where there's economic problems and when crime remains a difficult issue, that they thought many people were now voting by mail. And so they were expecting the turnout to be much higher than what the turnout was at the actual polls. And we should know that. We're going to, I think, switch to the city's webpage at about 10 after 8, and we should get the first look at what those absentee ballots, or I guess we shouldn't call them absentee ballots anymore, we should call them mail-in ballots, look like, and see if that increases the number of people participating. But for all the wonder, for all the amazing, for all the greatness of an election, few of us have voted. And when you consider not everyone is registered, and you consider 30% or 35% of the people who are registered voting to be a decent turnout, we in some ways, we embarrass ourselves. And we can talk about that, but I think that's the takeaway. It's a remarkable process in theory, and in practice, we fall, as President Obama once said, we fall far short of what we aspire to.
That is true. And, we hope that we're wrong about this turnout, but all indications so far is that it will be relatively low. Did we lose Vincent? Yep. I don't see him there. So Denise, let's talk a little bit about what I think a lot of people believe is the most competitive race on the ticket, which is these 2 at-large minority district council seats. And the way this works is there are 7 at-large members of council. Okay. 2 of those spots are reserved for parties other than the majority. So in this case, the majority party here is the Democratic Party in Philadelphia. So those 2 other seats are for Republicans, Independents, Working Families Party, you name it. So right now, in the last election, in 2019, the balance was 1 Republican, 1 Working Families Party member, Kendra Brooks and David Evans. In this election, Kendra Brooks is the only incumbent running because David O resigned to run for mayor. So there isn't really the assistance that being an incumbent would provide in this election.
I can move.
What are the odds here that either
I mean, are we bringing
two
another
working
table?
families
I think he's
members
bringing
get in there,
another
two
table.
Republicans,
Okay.
or half and half?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. There are many people who believe that this is the year that the Working Families Party becomes the minority party in council, with the exception of Brian O'Neill, who, while he's got competition this time around, it's highly unlikely that he loses his seat. But I think this could be the year that the Working Families Party becomes the minority in council at large. Now, what makes that interesting is, it took 70 years for a third party candidate to win 4 years ago. And if this happens, as quickly as it does, then we have to, like I was saying earlier, we have to look at what the Working Families Party did that other third party candidates haven't been able to do, other third parties haven't been able to duplicate. So one of the questions that I asked a lot of the incumbent council people, the ones that we kind of know are coming back to council because they're running unopposed, how would they navigate this new council if it does come to being? And they gave me, the standard platitudes of, well, we can work with anybody, and as long as people, remember that this is about their constituents and not their egos, we'll be okay. But, let's face it, Working Families Party folks, the Working Families Party philosophy is not the same as the Democratic philosophy, despite what Republicans would like you to believe. And a lot of the Working Families Party philosophy espouses goes even further to the left of what Democrats do. So it's going to be interesting to see how this dynamic gets handled in the event that this comes to fruition. It's going to be interesting to see how, council handles this, because if we discovered nothing else during the primaries, we learned that Darrell Clark, the current council president, was much more adept at keeping things together than we all thought, because all of, when normally stuff would come to council, it would be passed pretty, straightforwardly. And, there wouldn't be a whole lot of, discussion or argument on the floor. What we learned from all of the people who resigned from council to run for office, to run for mayor, that some of these discussions in council chambers were probably closer to fights. So it's going to be interesting to see if that's the dynamic that ends up at play when it comes to this.
Lance, what are your thoughts? Same question, basically. Do we see a trend towards the Working Family Party, or do the Republicans pull it back?
Well, as Vincent knows, I have run on a third-party ticket and supported third-party tickets in the past. The Working Families Party is unusual in that if you take their sample ballot, they endorsed Ms. Parker, and they will continue to endorse Democrats. They endorse Governor Shapiro, despite Governor Shapiro saying that he was in favor of vouchers. They will continue to support Democrats who are not necessarily progressives. So it will become somewhat interesting. The argument that the Republican Party was using some places, and not all over, was that the whole point of having two minority seats was to serve as a check and balance on the power of the mayor. And if you have candidates who support the mayor in council as the minority parties, it's unlikely that they're going to serve in that role of checks and balances. So if the Working Families Party, their secret sauce, as Denise was talking about, was to not really be an independent party, but really to be a faction of the Democratic Party, to run really good candidates on very interesting platforms, but on the issues that are contentious, the issues that are important to the Democratic Party, the Working Families Party supports the Democrats. And if you listen to what they were saying, they were continuing to say, look, if you vote for the two working family candidates, it doesn't mean that the Democrats won't win all 5 seats. And when Larry and I were traveling around, we're picking up the literature from the Working Families Party was very clear. Support the Democratic mayor, support the city council, the Democratic city council candidates, with the exception of just 2, and those were the 2 for the working families. They don't criticize the Democratic Party. They don't run against the Democratic Party, and that allows them to get a fair amount of support from the Democratic Party. And I think that's really their secret sauce.
It's a very pragmatic approach, and one that so far has proven successful. Vincent, what do you think the balance of council might look like after tonight? Or we may not even know exactly tonight, but what is your feeling?
Well, I mean, we can look at what we're going to see tonight, right? There's going to be a new mayor, right, in Sherrell Parker. And I will say this nicely, because I there is always a change from being a council member to being a mayor for anybody who has done it. Nobody goes in from council instantly being a perfect mayor, right? They have some of the skill sets, but it's a whole lot different being the mayor. Same way for the next council president. There's a difference between representing a district or representing at large and then having the weight of the council president, right? The person that you're going to be, if you're the new council president, you're going to be going back to Council President Clark and asking, well, what is some of the advice? How do you think I should handle this? What should I do? You'll go back to, say, Mayor John Street, who was once the council president, and ask his opinion. We will have, and Lance can correct me if I'm wrong, we'll have this will probably be the most Black city council that we've ever had. It'll probably be the council with the most people of color that we've ever had. And it'll be interesting to see if Brian O'Neill wins in the 10th. It'll be interesting to see if we continue to have a Republican member at large. Remember, we had I think the best chance that the Republicans had on winning re-election at large would have been for David O to have stayed in council. But I don't know if David O could have gotten out of the primary for the Republican Party because of the national feeling of the Republican Party. And a lot of the national feeling of the Republican Party, the way that voters think, have trickled down to the Philadelphia Party. It just has. I mean, we're not the party of Jack Kemp and pragmatic Republicans. There's no centrist Republicans don't really win, in races statewide and local races anymore. You have to be really connected to Donald Trump in some way. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think you'll probably remember Nicholas O'Rourke only lost to David O by either less than 1,000 votes. It might have been a few hundred. I just don't remember the number off the top of my head. So if he would win here, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And the Working Families Party has done just what Lance said. They don't go against Democrats, but their target is Republicans. And they have benefited, I think, in Philly and across the country from national Republicans and the shenanigans that they do. And then local citizens are like, I don't want that in my city council. I don't want that here. So I will listen to what they have to say. So I think the Republicans in this city are hurt because they don't raise a lot of money for their candidates, right? City council, the mayor's race, and they have to deal with some of the national zaniness that's happening, and that doesn't help them on the local level.
If turnout's a little higher than we expect, who does that help?
I'm going to say this. I think if there is one Republican at large who might win, underline might, I could see it being not Jim Hasher. Oh gosh, I can't. I drew a blank on the other. Drew Murray. I don't know how I blanked on Drew. I went to high school with him. But I could see Drew. He's a moderate guy. He's campaigned all over the city. He's more of like a David O type of Republican, but he's still really conservative in a lot of ways. I just don't see Jim Hasher just getting the support because I don't know if Jim has campaigned anywhere in places of color. Like, I don't know if you could say North Philly, West Philly, South Philly, places like that. Have they ever seen Jim Hasher knock on their door? They probably have. And you can't win a citywide election if you don't go citywide.
That's right. Denise, what do you think about that? Which Republican has the better opportunity to take one of those seats?
Well, I have to agree with Vince. Drew Murray is more the kind of Republican that Philadelphia elects. I mean, because let's be honest, David O got his time in council not because the Republican Party supported him. They never did. They're not even really supporting him now, even though he's their mayoral candidate. He got it from Democrats who were willing to say, okay, you may be a Republican, but we like what you have to say, so we're going to support you. And Murray strikes me as being that type of Republican. But in terms, if you're looking totally at television ads, which you couldn't get away from during the National League Championship Series or anytime there's an Eagles game on, the other Republican candidate that Vincent mentioned, he was, on TV every 5 minutes, looking like a combination of a longshoreman and a cop. And in some places, that's going to, because particularly among Republicans, I would lean more toward Murray. But, they're going to really have to fight the Working Families Party and what they've been able to accomplish in order to do that.
Lance, one of the interesting things that happened in this campaign for the Republicans is that Jim Hasher got the endorsement of the building trades. Drew Murray, who you would kind of think would be, again, like we've kind of discussed here, maybe the favorite Republican to take a seat, did not. Does that impact Murray more or Hasher more in terms of who is likely to have the best shot at this seat?
So I think it's too soon to know the answer to that. We saw how successful Mr. Boyer was, Ryan Boyer, the new head of the Building Trades Coalition, in working towards Ms. Parker's election. There, they were able to overcome all of the other candidates. What we don't really know is how much of that vote was driven by that coalition, and how much of the vote was driven by the old Northwest organization, and how much was driven by people's concerns about crime. But I think we're going to find out. I think we're going to find out how successful the building trades are at getting people to follow their vote. The building trades remain one of the richest, one of the most powerful unions in the city. And if they are really pushing this, that may be enough to carry at least one of the Republican candidates to the finish line and defeat the Working Families Party. Those of us who follow politics are very knowledgeable about the Working Families Party, and they're very dynamic candidates. But Larry, as you and I drove around the city, when we kind of left those wards where there's a very significant population of what are sometimes self-described progressives, and we went into other working class or middle class African-American neighborhoods, the committee people weren't supportive of the Working Families Parties. And in fact, the Working Families Parties didn't have any poll workers at those places. So I'm a big fan of Helen Gims. I think she's dynamic, wonderful. But in her campaign, one of the mistakes I believe her campaign manager made was thinking that because everyone around her thought she was wonderful and they polled their own people, they thought they were going to win easily and they didn't have to extend beyond their boundaries. And I'm not sure whether the Working Families Party is going to fall into the same category. Because they're African Americans, perhaps they don't think they have to extend. But it's really hard to see where their vote's going to come from other than those 4 or 5 wards where they're self-described progressives. And even in those
I
wards,
have to kind of push back on that, Lance, and I'll tell you why. You have a African-American community organizer who is like really popular within the community, and you also have a minister that is also popular within those communities. The Working Families Party did not make a mistake when they chose who they chose to run for these seats. They didn't go out and get the people who hang out at Netroots Nation. Went and got out the people. They went and got the people who live in the hood. So while that might have applied for Helen Gim's campaign, I don't think it necessarily applies here, because even if you take the Working Families Party moniker off of Kendra Brooks, these are still folks who know her as Kendra from the block, and they're telling us, and these folks can also tell their friends, okay, well, Nicholas is cool too. Drew Murray or the other gentleman that the building trades folks endorsed, they don't have that buy-in. These two people do. I don't think that they're necessarily banking on the progressive wards. And also, we have to remember that Bob Brady told all of his committee people that if you want to remain committee people, you're not allowed to endorse Working Families. Just because it's not on a ballot doesn't mean that somebody didn't take someone off to the side and say, well, we like them too. So, while I can understand that might have worked in the primary, I kind of have to push back on that in terms of the general, especially, when we're dealing with Republicans, because to the folks in those areas, in those working class areas that you're talking about, when they hear Republican, they hear Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell. They don't hear Drew Murray or anyone more moderate. They hear the far right. And that's going to have more of an influence than a lot of people think.
I think what you're saying is very reasonable, and it might turn out to be true. I'm not as comfortable as you seem to be that people are going to find their way to figuring out the ballot. The Working Families sample ballot, I think is a little difficult for people to understand what they were going to do. Because they're supporting Democrats and because they were supporting Ms. Parker, they didn't say vote for us only, which I think would have been a much easier way of approaching their base and the people who they wanted to support. They were saying vote for 3 Democrats and then vote for us. I'm not sure, without having someone at the polls to talk about that and explain it, how easy that's going to be for people to get. Now, they are helped with the elimination of what used to be called the big lever, the one push one button and vote for all the Democrats. Doing away with that certainly has helped the Working Families and all independent candidates. So there's some savings there, but it becomes this tricky message for them, not for their inner circle. Their inner circle, their top supporters are, of course, going to figure it out. But people who aren't quite so clear as to what they want to do, I think it's a difficult message to get across. Vote for the Democrats and then vote for us. Maybe you're right, and we'll see. But I suspect that most of their vote is going to come out of those progressive wards. And yes, I agree with you. They're very skillful, unlike some of the Netroots nations that pick white progressives to run and think that that's going to be sufficient. They were very careful about the candidates they picked and very thorough with that.
And one of the concerns I have. Oh, go ahead, Vincent, please.
No. And I also think one of the things they were the Working Families Party was very good at was they had money. Like a lot of these third party folks that have run for offices didn't have a lot of money over the years. So you just were kind of this fringe candidate that didn't have any money for messages and commercials and things like that. And also what the Working Family Party's candidates have done very well is they've kept up with their voters. They've kept up with their base, whether through emails or text messaging or whatever. So they kind of have a core of folks that they can get their message out to all the time, no matter what, no matter who it is. And also they've been helped by some of the folks that have been in council. Remember, Kendra Brooks was helped a lot by former council member Helen Gim in her first run. Jamie Gaudier, the councilwoman in the third, who is facing a challenge from Jabari Jones, which I don't think is going to kind of amount to anything. I think she'll be reelected when the night is over. But there were other electeds that worked as a team to help Kendra, right? Whether it was Isaiah Thomas and others that kind of helped. So that I think also helped the Working Family Party as well. But they've been very successful at saying, we're going to knock out those Republicans. And in a city that's overwhelmingly Democrat, saying that you want to knock out Republicans and the national people aren't helping Republicans, that was a good strategy by them. And that's the kind of strategy that they use all over the country. I mean, they've been successful in New York and other cities using that same strategy. Now, the thing I think that's going to be interesting for the Working Families Party, and this is looking ahead, is how do they get to other races? Good example. There was going to be a working family candidate that was going to run for city commissioner. That person was knocked off the ballot, so they couldn't run for city commissioner. So, you know, where do they find other avenues in Philadelphia to try to get involved in politics? Do they start running for state house races? They start running for state senate races? Do they look at, say, running a candidate for sheriff, running a candidate for register of wills? What is the next step after council?
That's a good question. But just to piggyback off something you said, Vincent, one of the things that, if I'm a working families candidate, that I'm concerned about here in the 3rd district, which would be a bastion of support for the working families party, I would think, you know, because there is that 3rd-party challenge to Jamie Gaudier, Councilmember Gaudier, it moves their ballot line over even farther. And sometimes a bad ballot can hurt you. And I looked at it when I saw it and I thought, oh, this moves them a whole row over. You kind of have to take your eyes over there to see them. It's not something that is catastrophic, but it's something that concerned me. But one of the things I will say, and I said this on a show, maybe the last show or the show before that, one of the things that this Working Families Party has going for them, they have good candidates. That's the first thing. They have money. That's really important. They have a lot of volunteers, and they have that extra thing, which is enthusiasm. Their volunteers want them to win and are working hard for them. And that's where I think they beat the Republicans. I don't know that the Republican Party has that kind of volunteer base here in the city. And that's, I think enthusiasm can equalize a lot of different things. And when money and support and all those things are equal, which I don't think they are, actually. I think the Working Families Party has more of those things. I think it can create a lot of momentum, and that can carry through to election day. But I don't know. We're going to see.
And I also think, Larry, if you look at the numbers, it's been kind of a perfect storm for the Working Families Party, because I think we have more independents now, whatever party they're part of, than we have Republicans. And
that number has changed.
Okay.
The Republicans are up a little bit, but
just a little bit.
When you put independents and third parties together, they outnumber Republicans.
That's what I'm saying. So they now have there's now a base for that kind of bubbling up from the surface. You know, in politics, as Lance can tell you, sometimes you need a perfect storm of events. You don't need to have a perfect candidate. You just need a perfect storm, right? And over the last 4 years, the Working Families Party has had a perfect storm. You know, more people registering as independent than Republicans, more money. Republicans have had a kind of a fractured city party, right? And they're not in the neighborhood. I mean, you know, people got to see you, right? They got to touch you. You know, and if you're not there, no matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, people aren't going to vote for you.
And they have had a great strategy, the way that they're running. And I think we often overlook the disarray of the Republican Party in the city of Philadelphia. Mr. Finnerty, who took it over, is the man who was forced out of running the parking authority because of his inappropriate behavior towards a woman employee. I mean, this is a party that doesn't show any signs of, as Vincent was saying, of doing any outreach to anybody. They don't show any signs of building up on any issue. If you were to ask what the Republican issues were in the city of Philadelphia, they would say the same that the Democrats say. In fact, you know, as good a candidate as former Councilman O was, when you would listen to him talk, it was surprising to hear how little he disagreed with Ms. Parker. You know, we have to deal with crime. We have to help people who come out of being incarcerated. We have to have good schools. We have to have a clean city. And there was no separation between many of those things. Whether it's because the Republican Party doesn't have a way of addressing those things or not, it just becomes the same situation. So the Working Families Party is out there. They're in the neighborhood. They do have a great strategy. Run as against the Republicans. Don't run against the Democrats. But I do think, as Vincent was pointing out, that is going to limit their future. And I think their money, if they ran against the Democratic Party, I don't think they would have the money that they have. I think what we're seeing is, some of the unions are kicking in money. Some of the Democratic Party people are kicking in money. And if they were to run against the Democrats, if they hadn't endorsed Ms. Parker, I don't think that money would be there.
And, one of the things to remember is the Working Families Party came from New York, where you can have the fusion tickets. We don't have that. And a fusion ticket, for anybody who doesn't know, is just when, you basically kind of can file on different tickets. Different parties can endorse you. You can have multiple party lines. Here we don't have that. But to me, it feels like that's what the Working Families Party is trying to do in some way. Be a fusion party with the Democratic Party and maybe bring them a little more to the left. Vincent, you're muted there. Yep. Still muted.
Let me turn myself on. There you go. But I think one of the things you have to remember, it doesn't really matter. You have to govern at the end of the day, right? And there's going to be 17 members of council, right? And there are going to be big issues that come in front of this council really quickly. When we get to the first 6 months, Mayor, let's assume it's Mayor-elect Parker or Mayor-elect David O. They're going to have to present a city budget within like the first couple of months of being mayor. So there's going to be a debate on that. Sometime in 2024, most likely there's going to be a bill introduced by Council Member Squilla dealing with the potential Sixer Stadium in Center City. That's going to take a lot of heat. People have thought we've had some heated council sessions in the last couple of months. Wait till you have construction workers in the chamber with folks supporting Chinatown and Chinatown businesses and all the lobbying that's going to impact these offices. And then you're going to have to take a vote, right? Somebody's going to have to vote on that legislation. So I think, you still have to govern. Like, people want safety in their city, right? So there's talk from Ms. Parker about possibly bringing in the National Guard to help with Kensington. I read that the governor today said, whoa, not so fast. I don't know if I've signed off on that, but there are going to be issues that come up in front of this council. So I always say it all the time. There's a whole lot of difference between campaigning and governing. And come January 2nd, everybody is going to be governing, right? And no matter if you're a Working Family Party candidate or Republican, your phone's going to ring that day and people are going to expect constituent services, right? And they're going to want to hear it. And they're not worried about esoteric stuff. They're basic meat and potatoes kind of issues. Did you cut the trees out of my alley for the tree removal program? Did you fix my pothole? What is going on with the light replacement program in the city? I hate the parking authority. I love the parking authority. Whatever issues, reality is going to come into play. And that's going to be an issue. I think, a lot of candidates are going to say what they want to do, and then they're going to get in and realize it's not that easy, right? Reality is going to strike them. So it's going to be very interesting, I think, because a lot of members are just going to be new, right? And there's going to be a few members that kind of know the way, and the new members are going to ask them. They don't know about committees and how to do them and, what to do. So I just give you an example of how rubber's going to meet the road come January.
Well, Vincent, let's talk about that for a second. It's safe to say that there are going to be 5 at-large Democrats elected. We know who they're going to be. Some of them are going to be new. We're going to have a new council member in the 5th district. Now, some of these people have experience working on or around council. You work in council.
Yes.
What is that learning curve like? What is that going to be like that first day? You're sworn in, and then as we get January, February, then March, we're in budget already,
right?
Which is the real test. What is that like for somebody?
Well, I've covered council for years. I've been a staffer for 2 council members. And it still is just a lot of stuff. Imagine drinking from a fire hose. You're just hit with stuff. Your first day, right? Staff is new. They don't know where the offices is. You got to get keys in. The offices have to be painted. The new members are going to have to deal with computers, and they'll probably get those. The office changes will probably happen in late December, early January. But then you're dealing with phone calls that are coming in, and constituents want help, right? They're going to ask you maybe the first days, congratulations, but I want this, I want that, I need this, I need that. And then you're going to be expected, whether you're an at-large member or a district member, to go to events, right? Because people are still going to expect what they expect, right? Like, say you're the 5th district, right? Jay Young was a staffer, and Jay's a great guy. I know him. I think he's going to be a heck of a council member. But there are going to be things that people are like, Council President Clark said he was going to do this. What are you going to do? You're an at-large member. There's an issue I'm really interested in, but can I do that? Am I going to be able to get through? Am I going to be able to know who to talk to in government? Because we also are going to have a new government too. So we're going to have new commissioners running departments, and they're going to bring on their staff. They're not going to know a lot of the history of things. So that's why it's important in government to really keep a lot of the people rather, who know the day-to-day workings of government. I've always said this. You can lose a commissioner, but you don't want to lose that deputy commissioner who's been around for 30 years and knows how to get the snow removed, right? You don't want to lose that person who runs the sanitation division and knows how to get the trash picked up. The top of the building, you can find a new leader, but the people who run the day-to-day stuff, those are hard to find, and you want to keep them. That's why they stay in government for like 20, 30 years. So it's just going to be the learning curve. It really is. A lot of these council members are going to be drinking water out of a fire hose. They really are.
Denise, we're looking at some new members coming in, and let's take the 2 minority seats out for a minute, just because we're not sure yet. But we have a good idea what Democrats are going to be elected. What does this new mix of council members, this new composition, look like to you? Does it mean that it's going to be a little more progressive, a little more active? What do you think?
I think that for a lot of the newer members that are going to be coming into council, these are people who have been involved in government before. They know how government works. And that's going to help, because a lot of times, particularly on the federal level, you get people elected to Congress who don't actually know how government works, and all they do is gum up the works for a while. These folks, Rue Landau and Nina Ahmad, and they know how government works. So they've probably already got some things set up that in the event that they win, they know, who they're going to put in what office, what they're going to do, and that kind of thing. Where it's going to be interesting is in the fact that council is going to be a younger council than we're used to seeing. I mean, because a lot of the old heads cleared out to run for mayor. So it's going to be interesting to see what these folks with new ideas and what the younger members of council that haven't been heard from as much do in this. When I was interviewing folks at South today, where all the candidates gathered for lunch, I asked some of the incumbent councilmen, what do you think is going to be, the difference in terms of working with the council you had and the new council? And they were like, they just have to know that their constituents come first. And sure, that's easy to say, but chances are a lot of these constituents have been asking for things from their outgoing council person that they didn't get necessarily. And they're thinking that they might have a more, eager to listen ear in the new guy, because the new guy didn't know, all of the stuff that the old guy did right away. So it's going to be interesting to see, what this newer, younger council kind of pushes people to do, or if they push anyone to do anything. Because, folks can get really, really stubborn when they want to be. And, there's a lot that we kind of have to look at when it comes to folks, learning how to, navigate things, it being new council people.
So I just want to say that we're about 15 minutes away from polls closing, and probably about half an hour, maybe a little less, before we get the first returns, which will be mail-in ballots. So we're looking for that. So we're a little ways away from kind of having the first clue as to how this is going.
Can we watch some of the videos of the poll workers and give them the what they're due? They're
Yeah.
they're there all day, and they're really doing they're really the backbone of a democracy. And I'd like to just give them a chance to, in their own words, say what's going on.
All right, let's take a look at some of these videos.
Especially since poll workers, there are stories coming out every day that say that we're losing poll workers because they're overworked, because they're underappreciated, because their lives are being threatened. So definitely they deserve their 15 minutes.
Well, Larry, before we go down, I don't want to take their time, but if anybody's still watching, you still have about 14 minutes to vote. If you're in line at 8 o'clock, you're allowed to vote under the law. And if you have a mail-in ballot at this time, please don't take it to the post office, because it will never get to the city commissioners by 8 o'clock. Find a green drop-off ballot. You can go to the Philadelphia City Commissioners website. They can tell you every list of where one is and drop it off there in the next 15 minutes. I'm done.
Okay. All right, let's take a look at some of these videos from earlier today.
If I'm mistaken, the 14th division.
Great. And your name?
My name is Jonathan Gordon.
Mr. Gordon, how's the turnout been so far?
I mean, it's been a little slow, but it turned out pretty good.
Great.
I'm sitting out here trying to maintain, make sure everybody that walk up get a little ballot paper so they know who they're voting for. But a lot of people already done voted on phones and computers, but
You think that's it? Most people are voting.
A lot of people are already voted, so it's like.
And are there any other poll workers? Are you the only poll worker today?
No, everybody else is inside. We help people with the polls, getting their names and registering them at the tables, and they go about their day. Before they step in, my job is to say, how you doing on this nice, chilly day? Ask them a flyer.
Thank you very much. Anything you want to add?
Only thing I want to add is, please, everybody, go out and vote. 18 all the way up to whatever age. Please vote, even if you're under 18. Go with your parents so you can know how to vote. Because eventually, all our votes matter.
So we're here talking about the election. How's the turnout been so far?
Well, we have about 50 people so far. It's kind of slow. They come in and out.
And how's it compared to other years?
Slow.
What do you think? You think in the afternoon, in the evening, a lot more people?
Yeah, but we have until 7 o'clock. We still have people coming out afterwards.
Are there any surprises? Any things that you're surprised to see?
No. Just that the neighborhood for a second, the market we sitting in front of the market.
Okay. Is there anything you think our viewers should know about this election?
Well, they should stay on board and do the best they can.
And Lance, thank you for that. And it's important because I've been a poll worker in the past. I know what that job is like, especially if nobody's coming out. It's a long day. But we did meet a lot of poll workers today. A lot of them had similar stories, and it's kind of fun actually to go around to the different polling places and talk to people and see what's going on.
People's dedication is really amazing. Again, I don't think we say it often enough. The block captains, the registered community organizations, the committee people, the poll workers, just people's belief in basic democracy is uplifting. And we have a huge amount of problems, and it's almost impossible to turn on the news and not cringe and feel sorrowful and really overwhelmed. But you listen to these people who show up and work, and they get a little bit of money, but they're certainly not doing it for the payday.
No.
Right. But it's what makes us as a country unique and makes people really special. And I'm deeply grateful that people care enough to do that.
Absolutely.
And the
Now,
one thing I will give that to you as well, Lance. Some of these people are paid for by the city commissioner's office, which oversees elections. But a lot of these folks are paid by the campaigns, right? They're doing their civic duty, and they know a council person or they know an opponent of a council person and say, I want to work. And it might be a way to get $100, $150 for the day, but they do work. I do want to say one thing. One of the people that you interviewed said people can vote by phone or by computer. You can't vote by phone or computer yet in Pennsylvania. It took us a long time to get mail-in ballots. So I don't want anybody to think that George Jetson's coming and suddenly we're going to have telephone voting. But you're right. We should be thankful that, and I've worked the poll as well. You literally start your day at like 6:30 in the morning, and you don't get done to like 8:30, 9 o'clock, right? And and that's a long day. Even if you take a break to get lunch or to get a hoagie or to go out and take a smoke, that's a long day. And people don't know where they're voting, and some are coming to the voting place for the first time. And we now have the electronic poll books this year, where it's not the paper poll books. People can just go on their computer and see it. And a lot of those elderly folks, they're not really tech savvy, so it's taking them some time to get used to playing with that and knowing what to do and things like that. So elections have a learning curve, right? We've only had the new electronic voting machines for less than a decade probably, and now we're starting with the new electronic polling book. So it'll make things faster. But I always tell people in every election, be patient with people, right? They're still learning new technology.
And we did hear from a few people that had voting machine issues.
Right.
Lance, I don't think anybody mentioned the poll books as a problem. I
No,
didn't hear that.
when a polling place gets moved, that creates problems for people. We heard a fair amount about that. We heard, the machines break, just like everything breaks. They get solved, but the person who's in there in the voting place when the machine breaks is the one who's getting the grief from someone who says, I came here to vote for work and you're telling me I can't because it's broken. So, again, they put up with a fair amount. They do the best they can. Some of the poll workers didn't want to talk to us. Most didn't want to be interviewed, but they stand up and they do their job to the best of their abilities. And we couldn't have elections without them.
That's right.
That's true. That's true.
Right.
And when a machine breaks, everybody ask for a provisional ballot. So basically, it's a paper version of the ballot. That's what it is. So anytime a machine breaks and somebody's like, "Oh, I can't help you vote," ask for a provisional ballot. It's basically the ballot on paper. You fill it in, fill in the circles, you put it in an envelope, and then they count it later. That is a vote, ladies and gentlemen. Don't let anybody think that's not some vote. That's some secret thing that's hidden somewhere. It's an actual vote, and it will be counted just like a mail-in vote.
Right. Now, Lance, turning back to the city council a little bit, there's something I wanted to ask you specifically. You have experience working in the mayoral administration and at city council. Can you tell us a little bit about what that relationship is like and how important that is for both the mayor and city council to have a good relationship?
Well, certainly to have someone like Council President Clark work with a mayor to be able to get things through, or really figure out how to stop the mayor from getting things through, is a tremendous difference. Let me give it two concrete examples. The former Mayor Nutter wanted to sell the gasworks. And one of the things that happens whenever you privatize a municipally owned utility is the city gets a tremendous cash infusion, but rates have to go up. There's no choice about that. That's what we're seeing in the suburbs as the municipalities sell their water and sewer systems. The municipality or the county gets a bunch of cash, but the rates go up by 50 to 70% over the next few years. And Council President Clark not only was able to stop the gasworks from being sold, but he was actually able to do it in such a way that there wasn't even a vote. he was able to build such a consensus in council that he stopped the bill from being introduced. So that's an example of a council president who can work with the council members and set the agenda. And that's very different than what former Mayor Street was able to do with former Council President Verna. And they built a relationship so that the two of them would get together, work out together what they wanted to do, and then do it. One of the things that former Mayor Street was very clear about was he wanted to reduce the wage tax on an annual basis. And Council President Anna Verna wanted to do that as well. So the two of them worked together to get budgets passed year after year after year and reduce the wage tax. Now, I know it wasn't a very significant reduction, and there are some of us who say, well, it would have been better to hold on to the money and reinvest it than it would be to give everyone back $12 or $14. But it's just an example of where a council president and a mayor together can work out such a way that the initiative is supported and passed through council. So I think those are two different examples. And it's going to be interesting. We don't know who the new council president is going to be. The Inquirer tells us that it's going to be Councilman Kenyatta Johnson. And I have no reason to doubt that, but the vote hasn't taken place yet. And I do think one of the other council people said he wasn't sure that that was a correct story. But whoever it's going to be is going to be dealing with a former council person. So you're going to have former Councilwoman Parker, assuming that she's going to win as the mayor, or former Councilman O as the mayor. You're going to have someone who knows how council works, working with a new council president that may give the advantage to the mayor in this case until the new council president gets comfortable with how council works.
And I would just like to add that I know somebody personally who did a lot of work to save the gas company, to make sure that didn't happen and would have been a disaster for Philadelphia. I won't name names. If we could bring up Lance's picture one more time, please. There he is.
All right. Well, thank you. But the truth is, for those of us who watch how politics happens, this is one of the most amazing political actions I've seen in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. Council President Clark not only defeated the bill, he did such a tremendous job of organizing that the bill never got introduced. I've been following politics in Philadelphia since 1978. I don't want to count the years, but it's a long time. And I have never seen anything like that, even in the bad years when Rizzo was there, and in the difficult years when Rendell was there, and in the years when Mayor Green was there, who couldn't seem to figure out how to do anything. And even with Mayor Rendell, who, along with Council President Street, figured out how to work together. I had never seen anyone do it. The Council President Clark got done. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's another thing we haven't really talked about yet with Council President Clark leaving. There's going to be a void there, and it doesn't matter who takes that position. No one's going to have that wealth of experience that Council President Darrell Clark has had for a dozen years now.
Right. It's also going to be true that everyone has their own style. Assuming for our discussion, it's going to be Councilman Kenyatta Johnson as Council President Johnson. He is not going to have Council President Clark's style. He'll have his own style, and it may take him a while to figure out what his style is. Certainly, even though Council President Clark worked in former Mayor Street's office when Mayor Street was the council president, they're very different in how they ran council, and people grow into the position and do an admirable job. But I don't think it would be realistic to expect whoever takes Council President Clark's role as the council president to be as comfortable in it as Council President Clark is now after he's been there for 12, 14 years.
Yeah, and that's perfectly reasonable. Perfectly
Well,
reasonable.
Council President Clark, you all have to grow in this job, no matter who it is. And as you know, Lance, I work for one of those people who may be the next council president. So they're just going to have to learn their own style, right?
Yes.
The next person is going to be compared to the former council president, soon to be former council president Clark. And he's going to have, I will say this, Council President Clark will go up there. If you look at the list of council presidents, as one of the best we've ever had in council in his 12 years, right? You can't deny that. But everybody's going to have their own style. But for a lot of the candidates, they're going to have no choice, right? Because January 2nd, you got to dive into the pool, whether you want to dive in or not. And, you're going to run the sucker. So, Darryl Clark's going to be like, he's the keys, I'm out. If you need me, call me. But they're going to have to run the ship. So it's going to be interesting, no matter who the council president.
All right, it is 8 o'clock here on WPPM, LP Philadelphia 106.5 in Philadelphia. You are listening to the Hall Monitor election special here on WPPM. It is 8 o'clock. Polls have now closed. I think not to do the thing that they do on television, but I think it's safe to say that districts 1 through 9, the incumbents are going to win. I think we can safely say that because only one of those candidates have a challenger. That's the 3rd district, Jamie Gaudier. I think Jamie Gaudier is going to win that seat going away. The 10th district, we're going to see. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you're right.
We can say safely that the 5 Democratic council members, council candidates, will most likely be elected. The 2 minority seats, we're not sure yet. So we'll have our first indication in about 10 or 15 minutes, I think, when those mail-in ballots come in. I'm going to keep refreshing now to see when that's going to happen, because now that it's 8 o'clock, I can't wait to get that first.
Larry, I think we can also say that the sheriff is probably going to win re-election.
Yep.
And we're going to have a new register of wills officially today, replacing Tracy Gordon, who lost re-election in the primary, but now it's going to be official with the register of wills. It'll also be interesting. We don't talk a lot about this as well. Who's going to be judges, right? Who's going to be the new judges in the city? Who's going to win retention, and who might win some of the statewide judgeships too? We have a few Philadelphians that are running for statewide judges. It'll be interesting to see if they win and how they're, if they do win, how they'll influence the court.
And that's going to be interesting. We're not going to know the results of the statewide races for a while because some counties, the county I grew up in, Delaware County, one of the last to come in every election. So we're not going to know probably until about midnight or so at the earliest long term. But here in Philadelphia, like I said, we're going to get our first indication relatively soon. And that'll give us a sneak peek into what might happen as we go on. Now, looking at these races, Denise, let me start with you here. Is there a race that we're looking at? Any one of these races more likely to have a surprise than any other?
I don't think so. And I say that. Well, first of all, Larry, could you please repeat the question because it's kind of loud.
Are any of our local races, is it possible that any of these could be a surprise? Result?
Well, like I've said, throughout the first hour, the one that I'm looking at the most is city council at large. Anything can happen with city council at large. And, that's what makes that race, so interesting to me. I'm also looking at the judicial races to see who wins, particularly for the Supreme Court. While the Supreme Court has a 4-2 Democratic majority right now, they've been having some issues with some voting rights cases that have come before them. So I'm interested in seeing what ultimately happens with the Supreme Court. And if because if it goes from 4-2 to 4-3 by the Republican beating Dan McCaffrey, then, you know, some stuff is going to get really interesting with 2024 on the horizon. And if you remember, if anybody remembers 2020, Pennsylvania was one of those states where Donald Trump said bad things happen when it comes to voting, and where folks were trying to do some things in terms of vote counting that were, you know, that were specifically designed to intimidate people. So, and the courts were the only thing that stood between them being successful in those ends and them not being successful. So I'm also looking at the judicial races for that reason.
And, you know, Denise, you brought up something that's near and dear to my heart here, the idea that elections in the city were somehow mishandled, or, you know, fraud took place. That was not the case. That is, you know, I don't know. I think you and I were both there when we toured the convention center when the voting operation was there during the pandemic, and you saw how clockwork that was. And we know how a polling place works, and how, you know, the votes are taken from the polling place. They go to the Board of Commissioners. They get tallied. There's almost no opportunity there for anybody to tamper with anything, or to damage anything, or to commit an act of fraud. It just doesn't happen on a large scale. There may have been a couple isolated incidents here and there, but you know, when we're talking about large scale things, that just doesn't happen. And that impugns the integrity of the people we've been praising, the people who go out there and try to do this and work hard to do this. It's a long day. It takes a lot to do this. There's a very specific knowledge base. And you know, it's reprehensible that was even discussed, you know. And I think it's really important to mention how much faith Philadelphians, I think, should have in this process, because it is a very clockwork process, and it's something people can believe in.
Yeah. And to be honest, I wish people were excited enough about voting to commit voter fraud. I really do. I wish
we're not
people
encouraging voter
cared
fraud.
enough
We're not
about
encouraging voter
the
fraud, ladies and
about
gentlemen.
the voting no, I'm not encouraging voter fraud, but in order to commit a fraud like fixing a game or something like that, you actually have to care about it. I wish that people around the country cared enough about voting, cared enough about protecting their vote, cared enough about who was in office and what they did for them or what they didn't do, to go out and actively commit voter fraud. But that's not the case. You had a mayoral primary back in May. Only 26% of the registered voters even bothered to come out. So how are you going to tell me that if only 26% of the registered voters even bother to come out, that there's voter fraud? If anything, there's voter apathy. And we really need to work on that as a society.
Well, Lance and guys, I know that I've got to sign off, because I'm going to be coming to where Denise is, because I have to see. I think she's at the Sheet Metal Workers Union down in South Philadelphia for what we expect to be Sherelle Parker's victory party. And Sherelle will also be able to give her first victory speech. If people remember, during the primary, she couldn't give a victory speech because she had a dental emergency that day and couldn't talk. So this will be her first speech, our first victory speech, if it happens today. So a lot of people are going to be down there. I think the race I'm really looking at, other than the at-large, is what's going to happen in the 10th Council District. I truly believe that Brian O'Neill is going to squeak it out, but I would not be surprised if Gary Messina would win this, right? I would not be surprised. And if that happens, it would be the first time, I think, since the city charter went into effect in 1952, the new city charter, that every district council person would be of the same party.
All right. Well, Vincent, thank you so much for joining us. We want to have you back on soon to talk about this. We have the first tranche of votes in, 69,000. I'm assuming these are the mail-in votes on the mayor's race right now. Sherelle Parker, 82%. David O, 17%. And write-in votes, less than 1%. That is for the mayor's race. For city council, Working Families Party is ahead. Kendra Brooks has almost 18,000 votes. Nicholas O'Rourke has just over 13,000. Drew Murray has almost 9,000. And Jim Hasher has just about 8,200. So that is where we are with the early votes here on in the election. On the Democratic side, Isaiah Thomas, 50,000 and a half. Catherine Gilmore Richardson, just over 50,000. Nina Ahmed, just over 47,000. Rue Landau, 43,641. Jim Harity, 40,500.
But Larry, let me ask before I get off that number that you were saying between Kendra Brooks, Nicholas O'Rourke, and the leading Republican. That was about 5,000-6,000, right? About 5,000-6,000. All right. If that spread continues, it'll get wider.
Yep.
In Philly. So that means Nicholas O'Rourke. And I'm just saying, if it continues, that's where I'm putting my pundit hat on. If it continues, then Nicholas O'Rourke would probably win the election. Because remember, he only lost to David O 4 years ago by a couple hundred. If there's a 5,000 vote gap, that's going to widen. So it might be a good day from Nicholas O'Rourke.
The only thing I want to caution is Republicans have been a little more wary of the mail-in voting.
Right.
So, there's the possibility more Republicans come out in person. However, if I'm the Working Families Party, I feel pretty good right now based on this very early result.
That's going to be one heck of a party down there. So I think after Sherelle Parker's party, I think the next party to go to in the city is going to be the Working Families get together. So I'm going to leave everyone.
And they're down
Thank
the
you.
street from each other, so it's convenient.
Oh, there you go. Well, I thank everybody. It's a pleasure to always be on the show. And if you need me or if people want to criticize me for what I said today, you can follow me on MediaManCom, MEDIAMANCOMM on Twitter. And you can also send me an email at mediamancom@gmail.com. I await your either praise or criticism.
Vincent Thompson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. So any thoughts on? Oh, go ahead.
I do think there's some other interest from other states, right? So Ohio has about 2 ballot questions. And again, Ohio has been very Republican, very Trump-like. And the question on the ballot is the abortion and legalized marijuana. And their polls closed an hour earlier than ours, I believe. And we're starting to see those results come in as well. And they're going to be based on the numbers that it looks like the state of Ohio is going to vote to enshrine abortion rights in its constitution, and is going to be joining the state of Massachusetts in selling legal weed.
Yep.
So, and the state of New Jersey, Pennsylvania will be one of the few states, right? We'll be in the middle. Everyone can buy legal weed in every state around us, but not Pennsylvania. You have to go to Ohio, Delaware, New Jersey, New York. Maybe not. Maybe you can't buy it in West Virginia, but all those other states.
The great liberal bastion, Ohio.
Right. So I think that'll be interesting.
That'll certainly make the Ohio State-Michigan game that's real interesting.
So
Because
many years.
Ohio State-Michigan is already nuts with just plain old alcohol. You add weed into the mix, woo boy.
Many years ago, I worked with a number of police officers who were advocating to legalize weed and make alcohol illegal. And their argument was, if they go to arrest a bunch of people, they much rather than be high on weed, because it's unlikely that they were going to argue, than to go and arrest a bunch of drunks, who they say often took on the police to prove that they were real men. And, this is a very small group of officers. I don't think they represented the majority of anything. But they were always horrified when they had to go and deal with drunks, because it ended up almost always being somewhat physical. And, their feeling was they couldn't win. If they
got a point.
Right. If someone took a swing at them, they had to hit back. And then, someone's filming it and, they look horrible versus weed. Come on with us. We have M&Ms for you.
They call them alcohol muscles. They don't call them weed muscles. When
Right.
people want to fight. And the only thing I've ever seen anybody on weed want to fight is a cheeseburger.
Right.
So,
I'm also interested in we're not going to get it tonight, but trying to think about what the future of the Democratic City Committee is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know what the state Supreme Court judge race is going to look like, but we will get a sense of where the vote comes out of tomorrow. We can look at it ward by ward and see whether the Bob Brady was right that splitting the ticket created problems for people voting, or whether the people who split the ticket, the wards that were supporting the working families, did a better outreach and were able to get more people to the polls. I also think this is really the first citywide election without the influence of John Doherty and Bobby Heenan.
yeah, he's on trial right now.
Right. So their money was missing, but not just their money, but also their organizational abilities. And I know that Ryan Boyer, Mr. Boyer, has stepped into some of that role. But again, he's someone who is growing into that role. John Doherty, good or bad, like him or hate him, he had been playing that role for 20 years. And during the course of those 20 years, he and Bobby Heenan had certainly learned how to do it. And I think we're going to get a sense of whether the federal government prosecuting Bobby Heenan and John Doherty has the added advantage of holding down the vote for Democrats out of the city of Philadelphia for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
And that's where it would matter most. Yeah.
I think so. It obviously didn't matter too much with Governor Shapiro, but again, Governor Shapiro took what could be called a cynical road by helping Mastriano win the Republican nomination. So he got to run against somebody who was not considered a moderate Republican.
Yeah.
Another Republican run, maybe it would have looked like a different race. But I do think State Senator Mastriano is up there today in Harrisburg talking about introducing legislation to do away with what they call the chemtrails. The things that, right. So
very important. Yeah.
So chemtrails are what a lot of conspiracy people talk about. When the jets fly by, they're some sort of clouds that come by. And it is an issue for the QAnon people and for a lot of the conspiracy people. I have not researched it. I don't really know anything about it. But somehow it doesn't strike me as important as what do we do about poverty? What do we do about schools? What do we do with the surplus that the state has? How do we make sure people have living wage jobs? Talking about chemtrails seems to me to be slightly askew from what most people want.
Yeah, they came out against condensation is what it is. That's what it sounds like to me.
But so that's what I'm going to be looking at. I think, again, Bob Brady has dedicated a fair amount of his life to building the Democratic Party. He was a congressman. He has been well rewarded for his service. But I can't guess how many more years he wants to do it for. Judging by some of his reactions in the media, it seems like he's had enough, right? Just saying to other people, I'm just going to outshout you, and I don't give it. I don't care. They can all go to hell. Sounds to me like somebody who is getting ready to step down. Maybe not, but you look again. Council is getting much younger, as Vincent pointed out. Much more African American, for the first time an openly gay lesbian member, South Asian member. It is really changing much more to look like the people who live in the city of Philadelphia. And maybe Bob Brady is thinking about moving down to Wildwood full time. Maybe that's what he has in mind. He certainly has done his service. I would be hard to argue that he hasn't spent his time fighting for what he believes is right for the city of Philadelphia and playing a very healthy role in avoiding SEPTA strikes and doing other things. Whether, again, not saying everything he did you like. I'm not saying everything that he did was right, but I am saying he has dedicated his life to what he believes was right. And I would want to honor that. He could have been one of those people like Mr. Norcross, who decided that he's going to make as much money as he can so he can stop Camden from redeveloping, right? So there's that level. And then there's someone like Bob Brady, who is doing what he believes is the best thing for people.
Yeah,
But
absolutely right.
I think we're going to get a sense of what the direction of the party when we start looking at where the votes come from tomorrow, from what wards and what divisions.
Mhm. Now, what we're looking at just over 69,000 votes, the mail-in votes right now, which is the number we thought it'd be around 70,000. That's what we had been told. So that's pretty close. Are you surprised with the 82-17 Sherrill Parker David O result as of right now? Did you? I thought that was going to be a little closer.
Well, did you say 82,000 versus 17,000?
No, 82% to 17%.
Oh. I think they probably will be calling that sooner rather than later if that continues.
NBC called it just now.
If that
Yeah.
spread continues.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe we can put up that vote for our viewers to see it as well.
yeah. And there's also two other races I'm looking at because Lance brought up Ohio. In addition to Ohio being where a lot of my family is, Kentucky is also where a lot of my family is. And once upon a time, there were only 2 Democratic governors in the entire South. One was term limited in Louisiana, and the Democratic the Democrat that they wanted to succeed him didn't win. But one was Andy Beshear in Kentucky, and he was running against the Attorney General of Kentucky, who was a protege of former Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. He is gone. Cameron has lost. Beshear has won re-election as governor of Kentucky.
How about
And
that?
one of the reasons why he won was because Kentucky had passed a law, saying that the anti-abortion law that didn't carve out extensions for the life of the mother, and Beshear vetoed it. It was overridden, but he vetoed it, and he said, and basically Beshear came out with a commercial where a survivor of incest told her story and basically said, if Cameron becomes governor, he would force me to have my stepfather's baby. And that basically, tore a hole open in the race.
Yep.
And another race that folks might want to keep an eye on in Mississippi, Tate Reeves is running against a gentleman whose last name is Presley. He's a relative of Elvis's, and he's running as a Democrat. And from what I'm hearing, he's got a real shot.
These were all at one point states that had Democratic candidates, and
Yes.
it becomes a question like looking at Governor Beshear and wondering what there's some lessons to be learned there. In the same way, we're looking at how the Working Families Party has won the 2 minority seats. Is there some lesson to be learned in Kentucky, which I in my memory, Trump won by more than 20 points. I don't know that that's right, but clearly he won it easily, and somehow this is Governor Beshear's second term or third term?
Second.
Second. So unlike Ohio, which doesn't elect any Democrats but wins on the ballot, it looks like Governor Beshear wins as a governor, and it's kind of, it's kind of like Senator Tester in Montana. There's a state that votes very heavily for Trump, has no other Democrats elected statewide, but John Tester has found a recipe or a way or a formula of how he gets his points across, and it would be interesting to see if there's any any issues that Governor Bashir and Senator Tester are talking about that resonate with people, so that they can overcome the Republican votes.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm kind of interested in right now, I just did the math, and I was an English teacher, so I want to make that clear when I'm talking about numbers. But it looks to me like about 26% of people who did their mail-in ballots voted for Kendra Brooks. So that to me suggests that a lot of Democrats did that strategy of voting for Kendra at least, and then picking Democrats to vote for. That's what it seems like to me. So it's if that's the case, right? If you get 26% of the electorate voting for you, and you're a nonpartisan, that could be a big night. I think that could be a big night.
So I'm not sure about your math there, because if she got 26% of the vote, how is it that she isn't beating all of the candidates?
She got 26% of the people who sent their mail-in ballots had her on the ballot.
Right. So that would be, she'd be getting 26% of the city council vote.
No. Well, all right. Double check my math, because it's very possible I'm wrong.
Well, it's just, she's at what, according to the webpage, if we can put it back up for a second.
She's got 6% on the webpage, but when you break down the actual ballots, she appeared on 26% of them based on my math. And again, I could be wrong.
But we'll just let it go, because we're gonna know sooner as opposed to later.
Yeah.
So I think we have no division. We have no wards reporting. We only have the mail-in ballots,
Right.
not the computer ballots or the phone-in ballots, just the mail ballots.
Right. Okay. So let's see here. Okay. Yeah, these numbers aren't going to change for a little while. Any surprises there? Anything that stands out?
Well, I think we could look at where the votes are coming from, right? Where the greatest percentage of the mailed-in ballots are from, and kind of overlay that on what we know about the wards, right? So, we can look like I live in South Philly. I'm in the 2nd ward, which is a ward that is supporting the Working Families Party. And you see an incredibly high percentage compared to everyone else of mailed-in ballots.
So I want to mention this, 10th District, Gary Messino, 57%, Brian O'Neill, 42% right now. And that's the mail-in ballots.
Right, but if you go up to some of the wards in the Northeast and you look at the percentage of mailed-in ballots, it's high, but not that high. Right. And out of the some of the wards where people are really struggling economically, the number of people who are voting by mail-in ballots really not that high.
Right.
But the 52nd ward is one that has a very high, again, over 9% of the people are voting that way. And that's a ward in West Philadelphia that would expect Ms. Parker to do very well in. So maybe it doesn't mean anything yet. 50th ward, again, almost 14% of the people are voting that way. So I think it's still a little hard to know, but we will get a breakdown soon.
And Jamie Gaudier, almost 87% against her challenger right now.
So we should ask a traditional question. Denise, how's the mood where you are?
We're coming in, and they look like they're in a good mood. Stevie Wonder is playing in the background, which, you know, it's never a bad sign at these things. But folks have, you know, more folks have come in since I got here. And the whole idea is that there's supposed to be a whole bunch of speakers. There's a speakers program, as it was told to me. And the earliest that they're looking for Sherelle to come on is 10 o'clock. I'm not so sure I'm going to be here by that time, but that's when she's supposed to come on and give her victory speech or her consensus speech, depending on how the polls go. Now, I've been kind of having, you know, discussions with people about, you know, calling the mayor's race. And folks are like, oh, you know, it's a wrap now. It's a wrap now. And I'm sorry, but as a journalist, when the AP says it's a wrap, then it's a wrap. It's not going to be your cousin Anthony saying, oh, Sherelle Parker won, it's a wrap. No, I want an official source, and you should want an official source too.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are, I think ABC and NBC have called it. I think based on the mail-in ballots.
Well, so we can play the Republican committee person's interview where he says it doesn't matter. We're going to lose badly. I think
He did say that.
So he predicted it correctly. Allison, if we could play the fourth of the interviews, and we can hear him make the prediction, and we can say he was present. He doesn't introduce himself as Nostradamus, but he must have been. Okay, we're here with
Timothy Reimer.
And you are the Republican committee person.
Yes, for the 46th Ward, 10th Division.
And how's the election going?
So far, the election's going fine. You know, it's the Republicans. We are going to lose most of the races. It's really just going through the motions at this point. You know, our commissioner, Seth Bluestein, is going to win. The thing is that, you know, people get out here and vote. You know, I don't care who you vote for. I just want everybody to, you know, exercise their franchise.
And your guess what the turnout percentage will be?
We're maybe we'll crack 40%, like overall. I don't expect high turnout. It's just people aren't excited.
So I think you got it right.
So far.
Wow, that's kind of depressing.
What was more amazing is he was there. And, you know, he was happy to talk about it. But you're right.
Regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. Go ahead, Denise. I'm sorry.
Well, no, what I was going to say is, here's what, you know what I want for Christmas? I want a true multi-party system in the city of brotherly love. I don't want it to be that we stop paying attention to the elections after the primary. I want competitive races. I'm not saying I want Republicans in office necessarily, or working families people in office necessarily, or even Democrats in office necessarily. What I want is competition. And I don't think that's so bad.
Right.
I want legit competition.
It was good to see a Republican, you know, even if you're not, you know, a Republican voter, it's good to see other parties out there doing what they can do. As of right now, though, if these numbers were to hold up, and there's a long way to go, there would not be a Republican on city council.
Right. And I think we can play the third interview with the Working Families Party, and we can hear what they have to say and see how close to right they got it. I think as Denise says, they were expecting to win. Today?
Yeah. I'm here with a Working Families Party. I'm supporting Kendra Brooks and Nicholas O'Rourke. I'm also supporting the state judges, and we're also passing out ballots for the judicial retention to say no to bad judges.
And what's the turnout been like?
turnout's been pretty light. There's 2 divisions here combined, and both were moved from previous locations. So I'm not sure if the low turnout is because of it being moved or just people thinking this is a Democratic town and like the elections were decided already in the primary.
Have there been any concerns at the polling place with the machines?
We haven't had any polling machine issues. We did have the judge of elections were denying poll watcher certificates from the Working Families Party here, and we had to get the DA's office out here to correct it.
Anything else you think our viewers should know?
No, we're just right now. Folks are focused on kicking the Republicans off of the city council at large for these Working Families Party candidates, making sure we kick the Republicans off of the state judicial courts as well.
So I think that sums up their idea of being competitive. They're competitive with the Republicans, not with the Democrats. It may turn out that they did exactly what they wanted.
As of right now, that is the case, but that's it's less than 7% right now. If we're looking at 25, 30%, this will only be a small part of that. Well, not a small part, but not enough right now to say that's what's going to happen in this election.
While we're looking at those elections, I've been following the vote in Ohio, and right now, according to the Ohio Secretary of State, the vote yes, the self-executing amendment to give every woman the right to an abortion and other reproductive decisions in Ohio is winning 62-38.
Yeah.
It's not close, and this is a state that can't that doesn't elect Democrats. It's actually, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but it is a shocking amount.
And we have a comment from a viewer, Bill Patchy. He's saying at the Greenfield School, 2200 Chestnut Street, they thought their turnout was a little higher than average, which is good to hear. Because when Lance and I had been going around this morning and this afternoon, we've been hearing just the opposite. It looked like things were lower than normal. But it's good to hear that at least in one place, and probably other places, we're being told that it looks like turnout was higher. Let's see here. Nothing new yet on the city page, but
the other thing we have not spoken about is we are electing a controller, and that is almost a completely quiet race.
Mm-hmm.
The former controller, Rebecca Reinhardt, stepped down to run for mayor in the primary, and she came in second, not a close second, but a second. And I forget where she now is. I think she went to one of the universities. But so we are electing a controller, and traditionally we elect a controller in an off year of the mayor so that the controller's role theoretically is to be the watchdog. And thank you. And it's not likely that will happen because of the way that this election was run, with the Democratic Party supporting both the mayor and the controller. And we'll have to see what type of freedom that the new controller is going to have. And perhaps I shouldn't say new controller. She was the appointed controller.
Mm-hmm.
She is running as an incumbent, but this will be the first time she's elected. And unlike the mayor, the controller does not have, there's no time bar. There's no limit to how many terms he or she can serve.
Right now, Christy Brady, the Democratic candidate for controller, has just over 90% of the vote. So while I'm not going to call that race, it seems pretty likely that she will be elected.
And just for clarity, we should mention she is not related to Bob Brady that we know.
Right.
There is more than one Brady in the city of Philadelphia. What a shock.
Just going through the row offices, Lisa Dealey and Omar Sabir both have over 50,000 votes. Seth Bluestein has almost 10,000. It is likely that the three of them will be your commissioners. Christy Brady ahead. Register of Wills, John Sabatina, the Democratic candidate, has almost 92% of the vote right now. And for sheriff, Rochelle Bilal, the incumbent Democratic candidate, has just over 80%, with her Republican challenger just under 20. So that's kind of where we are with that right now. It is likely that those numbers will hold up, or at least that those the candidates who are ahead will win those races. But you never say we're 100% certain, because you never know. But it is likely. The ballot question, we haven't talked about that too much. 89% to establish an office of disability services in the city. That would require a charter change, because to put new offices in the cabinet, there has to be a charter change for that. 89%. Usually these pass in most cases. Ballot question is going to pass. That's where this one's going to be. I think it's a safe bet that this one will pass. Let's see.
So we have a few minutes, and Denise has pointed out the Inquirer called it. And if we can put up the Inquirer story, I know it's a little iffy to put up another newspaper's story, but they've got it. So let's put it up. We can have a quick look at what they're saying. But I don't know whether they've called it themselves or they're relying upon somebody else.
Based on the numbers, I would say it's safe to, if we were asked to make a prediction, it'd be safe to do that right now.
Right.
You're talking 82%.
Seems pretty safe to me. Denise, what do you say?
Well, first of all, I was trying to mute my mic because people are giving speeches behind me now. But that kind of doesn't really surprise me. And Ryan Boyer is telling the bartenders to stop serving because folks are trying to talk. And I don't know who this is talking, but they're not amused. But I think it is kind of safe to say that Sherelle Parker is going to be the first woman to be mayor of Philadelphia, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes next and see who shows up here tonight later on in terms of elected officials and stuff. But as you can hear now, Ryan Boyer is giving a speech, and talking about the laborers' achievement when it comes to this. So, if you'd like to listen to that, I can put up my phone.
Okay.
Oh, let me see if I can do it. Oh, well, no, I would kind of need to. I don't know if I can do that for me.
Okay, well, that's no problem. But we can assume that this is a joyous speech.
I don't know if joyous is the way I describe it. It sounds like, it sounds like, pretty much a doggone it, you need to listen to me speech. But, they're happy, everybody here is happy that Sherelle is going to be the next mayor.
Okay.
Well, he said that, they check the temperatures with thermostats and change the temperatures, and it's hot as hell out here.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know what's happening there, but very well. There aren't any new results. We're still working with the mail-in numbers. We probably won't have any any updates before we go off the air at 9 o'clock.
I do think we should just note it's really a historic day. Right? And from the beginning of the history of Philadelphia until today, we have not had a woman mayor. Not just an African American woman. We haven't had a woman mayor. And this is really a tremendous accomplishment and really a tremendous step forward. And again, whatever we end up believing, whether Ms. Mayor-elect Parker is going to do a great job or people are going to be mad at her or anything else, I think that we should recognize that society moves forward when we have these breakthroughs and we are able to elect people who have never had power before. And, the Inquirer for week after week during the primary was writing that how she is part of the power structure. And I think that what we have to acknowledge again is that a single African-American mother who grew up in poverty, who struggled as a young person because her father wasn't there and her mother passed and was raised by her grandparents, is not somebody who joined the cricket club. It's not someone who went to Lower Merion to learn to play golf. And she has not been part of the historic power structure in the United States. And this moment comes to us as a result of a very long struggle for empowerment. And I would hate not to acknowledge that and at least think about that for a minute, how long this day has come, how long people have been waiting for this day, and what an accomplishment it is for Ms. Parker and all the people who have supported her for all these years to get to the finish line.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're
Well, this
talking
was a
about
historic election in a lot of ways. We have the first Asian, South Asian woman to be in city council. We have the first openly LGBTQ person in council. We have the first the first woman as mayor and the first Black woman at that. But as someone who is a member of a marginalized community themselves, as a Black woman, this is now where the rubber meets the road. Because while it's nice to have all these firsts and all these historic moments, and this is kind of a debate I've had within my own community about how I cover this mayor's office in the future. And the thing is, I am going to hold you to the same strict, exact standard that I have held every other person that has held that office. Because for me to do anything less would be making you into a token. And I'm not going to do that. I'm as a Black woman, I'm like, yay, this is a great moment for us, and I'm happy about that. But as a journalist, there are people that you are responsible to. There are people who elected you. There are people who elected you to solve some very real problems. And I would be doing less than my job if I didn't stay on top of you to make sure you solve those problems, to make sure that you honor your campaign promises. And that's because I have done it with every other mayor that I have covered before you came. I can give you a pass to an extent, but it's not going to be a long one because we both have a job to do. My job is to make sure you're responsible to the people. Your job is to do your job that you were elected to. And all I ask is that folks be respectful, when we come in to do the job, because we've already had that issue with this particular administration before things even got started. So all I want is for the folks that are, going to be in the mayor's office to understand that you got a responsibility. You got to fulfill that responsibility. And the first time you try to hide behind being a Black woman to avoid that, you're going to have a problem with me. And I'm going to let you know it.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead,
but with saying all that, if when I came to Philadelphia, someone had told me we would have a president by the name of Barack Hussein Obama, and we'd have an African American woman as mayor, I would have said, nah, that can't happen. It's not. We as a people are not ready for that, and we are obviously ready for that. And it's obviously we still deal with a level of racism. We still deal with a level of sexism. We still deal with a level of homophobia. But it is nice to know that there are enough of us who have said, whatever my personal fears are, whatever my personal challenges are, I'm putting those aside, and we're going to vote for these candidates because we believe they are the best candidates to lead us forward. And I think that's somewhat of an accomplishment for a society.
Absolutely. And it's overdue. Is there a concern that Mayor Parker is treated more harshly, differently than her predecessors?
So I don't think so. Partly because of how well she speaks and how good she is in interpersonal stuff. When I've heard her speak over the years, it's always very moving. You hear Mayor Kenny speak, and at least I don't feel moved by it at all. In the presence, and I've been very fortunate to be in the presence of a number of the mayors, and with the exception of maybe Mayor Rendell, you don't feel in the same way. I don't feel in the same way that I feel in the presence of Mayor-elect Parker. So I think that there's going to be a tendency, because of her personality and her ability to connect, that she's going to get a little bit more of a pass than someone who we tend not to like. And those of us who are fond of Mayor Street recognize that Mayor Street was not fond of the media and didn't make himself available or friendly. And as a result, I think they responded. Mayor-elect Parker, I think, is personable with almost everyone, and I think we're going to see that.
What do you think, Denise?
Well, I keep muting because I don't want, to have to talk over anybody. But I think that on some level, you're right. The thing is, people want to give the mayor a chance, no matter who it is, to settle in and get started, doing what they need to do. Personally, I think Philadelphia is kind of behind the rest of the country in terms of having women as mayors, because several other cities have had, in some cases like Baltimore and Atlanta and even Boston, they've had several female mayors. And I think we're behind in that regard. And I'm glad that we finally caught up to the rest of the country in that regard. My hope is that there'll be so much good and interesting coming out of this administration that we don't have to talk about whether or not she gets a pass, because it's just going to be business as usual.
Viewer Star Dancer Supreme says Mayor Parker will be treated differently. We may not see it in public.
And we hope she's not going to be like Catherine Pugh in Baltimore, right?
No, because see, that was stupid. If you're going to do something that gets you in trouble, don't do anything stupid that just makes people say, wow, how did you become mayor in the first place? Because you're kind of dumb.
As a side, I did a television show with her for a year and a half. And when she won the Baltimore mayor's race, she reached out to us. And I had, this is my home. I'm not leaving Philadelphia. But then to pick up the newspaper and read that she's a convicted felon was quite a surprise for me. I can't say I knew her well, but she always seemed like a really decent, honorable person. Why someone would do that is beyond belief to me. It's not like mayors don't make a nice living.
That's for sure. So there are no new results that I can find.
I think the 76ers drummers have, walked it.
So we're starting to see some of the count come in. Not a lot, 887 votes. So it doesn't change much right now. So we're going to be off in about 5 minutes. So we're not going to have anything new. before we go off. But we can say for sure, Cheryl Parker will be the 100th mayor of Philadelphia. We know that the 5 Democratic candidates for city council will be elected, council at large. It's safe to say Jamie Gaudier will be reelected in the 3rd district. And, you know, it's a little early, but, you know, it's not a huge leap to say that Kendra Brooks could be reelected, most likely will be reelected to city council. Looking at the numbers, not much has changed.
But before we go off the air, I think it is worth pulling up the Supreme Court race to have a look at how the city of Philadelphia did with the mail-in ballots. And it would look to me like the city did very well.
62,000 votes for Dan McCaffrey for Supreme Court. Almost 58,000 for Tamika Lane. Almost 57,000 for Jill Beck. 61,000 for Matt Wolf for Commonwealth Court.
But these are the races where I think nobody knows anyone, and I think you see the organizational strength of the Democratic City Committee and the Working Families Party. You know, I'm sure that there are people who know who Matt Wolf, the Democrat, is, but I think that's a relatively small number for the Democratic City Committee and the Working Families Party to collect 91% of the votes is an indication that they were really working.
Yeah,
and they were really doing quite a job. You know, with mayor, you can think people know what they're doing, and even with council, you can make the argument that people know who they're voting for. But I do think it's hard to make the argument that somebody knows the difference between Matt Wolf and Megan Martin in terms of where they stand on issues.
Right.
It's just the organizational strength that makes the difference there. So I think, again, when we get together tomorrow, we'll have more of an indication. We'll get a chance to look at it and figure out how well or how poorly the Democratic City Committee functioned and what the future of the party is. Obviously, if they're able to maintain these levels, it would be pretty clear that when it comes time for the presidential election, that the presidential election is going to come through Philadelphia.
Yeah. And, you know, what I would say is if you're really curious, but you have to go to bed and get up for work tomorrow morning, you're not going to miss much. You know, it might not be worth staying up till midnight. I will, even though I have to get up early and take my son to school. But I'm going to be doing it. But, you know, you probably won't miss much. Tomorrow morning when you get up and you want to take a look at it, that's when you'll have a really good indication as to what happened. Because some counties are just going to take longer to get in. But, yeah, I agree with you, Lance. These are strong numbers right now from Philadelphia. And hopefully the election day operation pulled people out. The weather was fine. You know, it was a good weather day. So we'll see how many people actually came out. That's going to be crucial.
Although we did hear some people complain about the weather, and Larry and I looked at each other and was like, what's wrong with today's weather? It might rain tomorrow. Is that
for November? It was pretty good.
Little damp, 65 degrees. You know.
Yeah.
What's that line from that movie? It's a good date because I could wear a jacket.
Yeah. You know, I've done election days in the rain, in the pouring rain. So this was pretty good. So, you know, if you're working families, you're feeling good. If you're almost any incumbent, you're feeling good. With the exception of the 10th district, that's still too early to tell what's going to happen there. We've got a ways to go for that one. But overall, it's been an interesting night. So we're at the end of our show for tonight, and we will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. at our normal time to evaluate this election and talk more about it. So we'll see you tomorrow on Hall Monitor.